to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Tyler, we'll do the roll.
Bowser.
Here.
Gilman.
Yes.
Merrick.
Here.
McKellar.
Here.
Here. All right. I think at this point, I'm supposed to ask, I guess even probably in this one, is anybody in the room with you, Andy?
Nope, I'm by myself.
Mark?
Nope.
Okay. Got that formality taken care of. All right. Looking for approval of the agenda.
Move to approve.
Support.
Motion by Stephen, seconded by Bill, to accept the agenda as presented. Roll call. Roll call, Kylie?
Gilman.
Yes.
Merrick.
Yes.
McKellar.
Yes.
Bowser.
Yes.
Brown.
Yes. Conflicts of interest. Any conflicts of interest? Andy?
Nope.
No. Mark?
Nope.
Nope. None here. All right. Our first public comment, I think. Kylie?
Any person may make an advance appointment with the board regarding road commission topics for regular or special meeting in accordance with the Opens Meeting Act. If an appointment is made, the topic will be an agenda item. The following applies to public comments. Please state his or her name and address. Topic must be relevant to the road commission. Individuals are allowed to speak once for up to 3 minutes on a single topic, which may be extended by the chair. A group addressing the board requires a designated spokesperson who may speak up to 10 minutes. The board will not act on any item from the public that is not on the agenda. For people using the Zoom software, please raise your hand through Zoom. If you are calling in, we will unmute callers. If you wish to speak, say yes.
What do we have to do? 30,
Joe,
30
anybody?
seconds, is that what it is?
Section 1 thing. Any hands raised?
I don't know, my knee controls my life.
You see any hands raised? No? No?
My knee
It
controls my
doesn't look
life.
like we have one call.
Okay, just one.
What happened? So. Is Mark still a co-host?
Can't tell you.
Additional for this guest, I mean.
You want me to put the agenda up on the screen? Does that make it better?
It might.
Looks like it's a blank document.
Yeah.
There we go. Okay.
You got the work session back there, the whole thing.
Page 1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay, did anybody?
All right, I am just gonna bring this up to this point of the agenda, which is where we're coming up to now, after the public comments.
It is shared now. But it's not on the projector in the room.
Okay,
Did we have anyone for raising
There was
hands
one
for
phone
public?
call that we made.
so we need to check with the phone call.
And do that right now. You wanna,
Just say caller and then the last 2 digits or something.
yeah, caller, with the last 3 digits of 465, you're unmuted. If you have any comments or public comment, now's your time. Hearing nothing, you are now back on mute.
And nobody raised their hand.
Nobody raised their
That's
hand?
what I see.
Okay, I guess we will proceed on. Item 6, which is the work session topics. It's item A, which is the only item on the agenda, East-West Corridor Phase 2 recommendations. I will remind everybody and anybody else that's online here, this is a work session. Recommendations may be made tonight, possibly, but there will be no action by the board as far as choosing anybody to proceed on for us for phase 2. That possibly could happen at our next regular meeting, but it is not going to happen tonight. So there'll be no decisions made tonight. So just so everybody knows that. So, okay. I guess, staff is going to present a review of all the recommendations and solutions here. So I guess that's.
I can start and then we'll bounce back and forth as we start talking about some specifics here. As part of the agenda and the attached packet, I did present for you a memo discussing what has happened as part of the East-West Corridor study and where we stand today. As of last year, we did complete phase 1. We are now ready to move into phase 2. At the time we went into phase 1, we put out an RFQ asking for qualifications from as many contractors as were interested in submitting. We went through those contractors and the decision was made to proceed forward with OHM. They had several subcontractors or sub-consultants that did different work for us as part of this. And some of them they never made it to because we hadn't got to the phase 2 yet. So what was done is you had MKSK Studios for public engagement and Parallel Solutions for facilitators. Those were the ones that led the meetings, coordinated the meetings, did everything for us for any of our public relations as part of the project for phase 1. GEI Consultants was the recommended environmental. WSP was for the traffic modeling, and originally Gordy Frazier was the technical advisor / survey and design support. One of the other contractors that was around and originally made a proposal for us was NDG, and they were actually purchased by OHM, and so they would be moved in to replace Gordy Frazier as the technical advisor / survey design support. SME is their geotech, and First Right-of-Way is who would be dealing with the right-of-way acquisition. When we went through this, we had everybody from the engineering administrative staff as well as Commissioner Mauser that went in to do the evaluations of them. And that's when we came up with the selection of OHM. We are now at the point of phase 2. The intention of the original RFQ was to find a contractor that was capable of performing all 4 phases of work. As we are now, phase 2 is actually phase 2A and 2B, because the first thing is to start looking at specific recommendations for what needs to happen. And then after that, whether it be a crossing or another solution for the long term, because the phase 1 did give us our short and medium terms. Now we're looking at the long term, which is potentially a crossing. We need to have this selection and location of where a crossing or any other improvements would be. And then after that, we would then be entering into an agreement for 2B, which would be the actual environmental impact and evaluation of what would happen when we push through whatever next project is. So what we have done differently in this is we pulled out our agreement with MKSK and Parallel Solutions, who were the ones who dealt with all of our citizen interactions and all of our meetings. And we looked to find somebody who could do it as a separate entity, who would not have any tie-in to OHM, and they would be standoffish even from us, but we would be paying them. They would be basically the neutral party to make sure the meetings, the public engagement all goes through without any agenda being presented from the board or from the consultant. It would be strictly based on the findings of the study, and we would go forth with it. So we looked into that, and we have a proposal in place from Networks Northwest for $11,200. This is for them to provide a place to host a couple of these meetings at least, as well as dealing with having a facilitator on site. So the Networks Northwest was not involved with last section at all. The only thing they did was offer us up their conference room to hold meetings. So they were not involved with any of the public engagement last time. So at this point, I've kept this original memo quite brief, and I want to make sure we have time to go through everything. But we have a lot of information here available, and we will go through it. And if you decide you want to see more information, we also have additional information. I think the total packet here is 139 pages. So there's a lot there. I don't know if everybody went through everything, but it's a lot. I mean, it's not a small amount of data. So we kept it, to the majority of what we felt we needed to have. And then you as the board can then determine, where we go and what other information you want to have. So at this point, after this memo, I put together in order kind of how things happened with the original qualifications proposal. The original proposal took approximately 1 year from the time of the board giving the okay to proceed till the time when the board signed an agreement with OHM. So it took us about a year to find the contractor and work out the details, get the prices in place, and then move forward with them, as we felt at that point they were the most capable contractor that we had of the 3 that we interviewed, which were OHM, NVG, and Bergman Engineering. So I have in here, I provided for you in your board packet, the request for qualification that was sent out. I don't know if anybody wants to go over any of the details, but it was a 5-page setup for what we were asking them for. And then we additionally added an addendum to it to extend the deadline, because we had some additional questions that came in, and we had extended the original deadline from the end of June to the end of July. At that point, then Jim Johnson did draft the letters for us to each of these contractors and set up the meetings. We had the 3 interviews, which were attended by Commissioner Mauser, County Highway Engineer Johnson, Assistant County Engineer Joe Slanecki, Grand Traverse County Board of Commissioner Manager Jim Cook, and Traffic Safety Services Manager Garth. And I don't remember Garth's name, I'm sorry. So, so we sent out letters to all of them, and then we started collecting information. I provided for you each of the members' feedback, except for Mr. Slanecki's, who we were unable to find within the electronic files. But we did have his score on the original score sheet. I don't know if anybody wants to go over any of the questions at this point or anything else, or if I should just quickly move on. Andy?
I'm good.
Mark?
Well, keep going.
Okay. So we did put in here each of the individuals who assessed this with all of their information. And we came out with a final score for each of them. And that was, yeah, it's in the 90s. There we go.
In the 90s.
Somehow I got 2 of them. One of them went on to 2 pages and the other did not. But it's easier to see. The finals scores were 90.8 for OHM, 86.4 for Bergman, and 85.8 for NDG. At this time, OHM was also the highest in every category except for consultant location, as they were down in Livonia, and NDG was at the time in Petoskey. So every other category, OHM was rated the highest. They then provided us a scope of service, which they went through. There were some changes that happened after the original scope of service. They did go through, and we had some difficulty getting traffic modeling from MDOT and pulling together the information from the original TC Talus. So because of MDOT and a couple other delays, it was going to take an additional 6 months to a year for us to be able to collect the data that would be needed to do the modeling of this project. Rather than waiting that year, the board at that time approved a change order to OHM's agreement in the amount of roughly $50,000. And they then collected the traffic data for themselves so that we could move forward according to the schedule, or as close to the schedule as we could. I put in here everything they submitted as far as who was going to be involved and the steps that would be involved and how it would go through. And we've gone through all of them. There's been some discussion of how things were handled. If anybody has any questions about that, I've gone through over 1,000 pages of notes to try and figure out everything and how this whole thing came about. So if anybody has any specific questions about how the first phase ran, now would be the time. But this is the actual schedule also of what they originally produced for us and how it was going to be laid out. They gave us the Gantt chart, and it was later expanded due to some of the delays before we finally signed the contract in January of that next year. So is there any questions at this point, Andy?
So looking at all that information, their Gantt chart and what they talked about before, with the exception of MDOT's issues, they stayed pretty close to schedule, or were they off on other things as well?
There were a couple of additional delays getting some meetings scheduled. as far as getting together when we could have them. The original delay, this project was anticipated to be done. Let me see what the exact date was here. I can't remember it. It was supposed to be done
March.
January of 19, and we were finished in May of 19.
And we gave them 60 days for the MDOT issue? I'm saying, I don't remember. It's more a question than a statement.
I think the MDOT issue just filtered in along with the process.
Yeah,
I think it maybe made it run over some, but I
That's what I
think
mean.
the MDOT thing, it wasn't just, that last 2 months wasn't because of the
Yeah,
MDOT.
we
thing.
knew the issue along the way.
Right.
yeah. And I think from what I remember, I think we told them we understood it would take them time. And from what I gather, it was a roughly 90 days that they figured it would be for them to collect the traffic data and get it put into what they could collect. And it seems like they were fairly close to that deadline. Because like originally they were expecting to be able to get MDOT data. We were originally told that MDOT data was going to be available. MDOT was over a year behind at this point, and even if they prioritized Grand Traverse County for the entire modeling area, it would still not have made anything with this schedule. We would be talking about finalizing the Pell phase 1 here. We would have talked about probably this February instead of in May. So the final meeting, the big meeting when I started was in February. And then we had that final meeting to talk to the citizens based on the recommended alternatives.
Right?
And then after that, after they did the recommended alternatives, it was roughly 30 days before they came in to do the actual board presentation.
Thank you.
Mark, do you have any questions?
Nope, keep going.
Anybody here? Okay. Consultant agreement, I put in here of what we had. And when it was signed and everything. And so that basically is the final of what was phase 1. So basically, yes, there were some delays. It ended up going about 3.5, 4 months longer than it anticipated originally. Some of it was related to the traffic data. Some of it was related to just getting meetings scheduled and getting public accommodations that could handle the number of people we expected to have at each of these meetings. So since then, we went back to OHM to get an idea of what their next scope and background was going to be. And so that from this point, I'm going to let Wayne take over because he's been dealing with that with them far more than I have.
All right, thank you, Brad. So working with OHM, they've put together this next phase, phase 2, after following up and coming up with from the public inputs and the 5 alternatives. They went out and started working and putting together a team. They also then took that team and approached and talked with the Michigan DOT, as well as with our local Michigan FHWA, in order to talk about the Pell processes, and which is a federal process. And so OHM wanted to have some conversations with them. Through those conversations, they have come up with the recommendation that we look at this and develop this as a focused Pell. But now what we're doing is this is going to pick up the Pell process from where we left off with phase 1. This evaluation is going to be additional roadway capacity if needed, and serving our east-west travel demands, and looking at these then 5 alternative corridors. This Pell, this focus Pell is, in their terms, more rigorous assessment of these practical alternatives that have come out from phase one. And this is going to be, this is necessary when we're looking at extending and looking beyond this initial 10-year period that phase one was looking at. So with this, this is going to kind of be looking and pushing us all the way out and looking at up to the year 2045 for that 25-year look ahead window that they have. So the conversations with MDOT was to be looking at and following this environmental process to determine our NEPA classifications, as well as then moving forward into a more formal FHWA involvement and putting this into place that picks up at the end of phase one. So the study team is comprised of OHM advisors, WSP of Michigan, and local GEI consultants here in the Traverse City area. So OHM will be the lead in the contract and looking at the traffic analysis and the bridge concepts. WSP is going to be the lead on the Pell process. They are, they're one of the best out there dealing with these Pell processes. So they're a very strong partner into this. They're also going to be looking at traffic modeling and these alternative concepts. And GEI is going to be looking at the ecological investigations. As a side or as a separate contract, what OHM has looked into and has had conversations with and what they're recommending is that we have a separate contract with Networks Northwest, and they're going to act as a local facilitator. And by having a separate contract with them directly with us, that keeps them at arm's length. And so they'll be truly viewed by the public as being non-participating and having no set agendas. They're not going to be directly working for the consultants coming up with the alternatives. So they'll be, it's just a better way in which to be able to present this to the public. And so we have an estimate from Networks Northwest to act as that local facilitator onto this.
So they'll be the messenger, so to speak?
They'll be doing the coordination of setting up the public meetings, setting up with the public interest groups, and they'll be that voice out there, and then they will facilitate those meetings. So it's not us up there or the consultants up there running those meetings. It's non-judgmental, if you will.
A neutral party, so.
A neutral party, yes, better terminology, thank you. On that.
I got, excuse me just for a minute. I look at Networks Northwest as fulfilling the same thing as Megan Olson did with Parallel Solutions, where she was the one that set up the facility. She was a facilitator for the event. And unfortunately, there was commentary coming out of the engineering group and not from Megan's firm. And we hired her through them as a subcontractor to handle that. And that did not take place smoothly at all. And I guess, you know, I just got to make this statement at this time. I couldn't be more uncomfortable looking at a proposal from an organization without having any other organization at this point providing a proposal. I think that we've just jumped out the gate pretty quick. And we all went into this with the idea that, you know, we definitely did not sign an agreement to do all phases with one organization. And so we left that door open for us to, at the beginning of phase 2, to do another survey, or at least put it out there for other groups to look at the phase 2 that they would propose based on what the first phase generated. But we went past that. We went right past that point where we put it out there. And now we're digging into the details of a scope of services for a group that we've not approved without even considering any other group. So I'm pretty uncomfortable with that. It's not OHM at this point. It's with us that I have a problem with our process. So I just got to let everybody know that's where I stand about this particular issue. And I'm not saying that I would not approve of this engineering group, but to go through their proposal to us without having any other group having the opportunity to propose, it seems a little off to me. And we did have problems. And if you think about it, they missed their deadline by over 40%. That's significant. They said 12 months, they did it in like 17. So they're off there. And they were definitely off on the traffic patterns. They should have been straight with us up front and said, we can or cannot get them. And if we can't get them, then here's what we should be charging to get them. And we can guarantee that. So that's where I'm at. I think we're just we're out the gate pretty fast on this. And I just think we got to back up a little bit.
Just to back up what he's saying, I mean, we definitely, this is not the first we've, been on notice that he's been unhappy, or I've been unhappy at times with just going forward and saying, OHM, you got this, and we're going to keep, but I do note in their phase 2 scope and proposal that they certainly are covering their rear ends as far as more costs being available to us down the road. I don't know if you notice, the language includes if there is more time that needs to be put into this, we're going to charge you more. I mean, ultimately, the language, at least 4 times in this, it says that. I think they learned their lesson because they really felt or being uncomfortable about the traffic study issue that we had, that of course delayed it and then cost us an extra 50 grand, which doesn't exactly make us popular out there, but I'm willing, again, as with Mark, I'm willing to, let's look at this, let's talk about this, and let's talk about what the alternatives could cost us in terms of time, in terms of, where it's at in the process. But I think we need to be aware that, if there are alternatives, we need to at least discuss those alternatives, just from a fiduciary standpoint, our responsibility to the community, taxpayers, yada yada yada, and all that. So.
Good. Thanks. Because I did call some other people that I know that have used OHM, and I know it's my former employer, but I talked to a lot of people at the city of Ann Arbor, and they exclusively use OHM for any of their Pell processes. They have tried other companies and they have found them to be very scattered and unorganized and not able to come up with the solutions that were creatively generated, as opposed to, okay, well, there's this, this, or this. They were not able to look further in and get some other things. They spoke very highly of them. I personally have worked with them on one Pell process down there, and I worked on them at the end of this. And from every notes, all the notes that I went through from Jim Cook and from everything here, everybody was under the assumption that MDOT had this data and we were going to be able to get the data from MDOT. And there are records that say MDOT does not have this, and it would have delayed us a year to get it. So I can't necessarily say that it was OHM's fault when MDOT was, everybody assumed at that point that MDOT was going to have this data available.
Well, MDOT had even told us, remembering back, and then they backed up, oh, I guess we're not gonna have it. If memory serves right, that, you know, and I'm not trying to pump OHM up here, but I think that we were told MDOT had it. MDOT told us they had it, and then MDOT came back to, oh, well, we're not gonna have it. So, you know, I think that was MDOT's deal on that.
Yeah, and that clearly was the majority of the delay of this project, was the fact that then OHM had to go out and collect all of the traffic counts for this study. They had to do it all, and it's, you know, you're 60 to 90 days to get that many traffic counts, get them verified, make sure they're actually joining and they make sense, that you didn't miss a lot of traffic somewhere. I mean, I've done a lot of traffic counts in my life, and it takes a long time to do traffic counts to get them to be usable. And 60 to 90 days, I would assume, would be a reasonable number for how long it takes to get the number of traffic counts they got. I'm not saying that, you know, that means we use OHM. I'm just saying that that is where the majority of the delay that I see going through the back notes and everything else. And like I say, anybody who wants to go through all 1,000 pages, I'll sit down with you and we can go through them all together. But there's a lot of other things, and there are some things that were done here that I think there's a misconception of what a Pell process is still to this day.
Hey, Brad,
Yes.
while you're talking about the delay with the MDOT, I remember what as Carl said it, that MDOT had told us they were going to have it, or told OHM, and the understanding was that. But I also believe when OHM, God, I can't think of his name right now. When OHM was presenting to us that extra $50,000, they said it was going to be a very minimal, and I want to say 30 days was what we were told at the time, delay because of the MDOT study not being done for them. I'm still not sure where that extra 2 to 3 months came from.
Andy, you are absolutely right. We did grill Matt pretty hard on that because we were looking at, that's a 15% increase on our study cost by coming up with the 50 grand. So we drilled him, and he did say that it was going to take about 30 days to gather the information. So, you know, I think he was putting best foot forward, you know, and letting us know that it, but
Well,
15% overage, and then, you know, 45% longer. But I still, you know, I got a question. Didn't we feel comfortable with the process for the selection of them the first time? I believe we did with the process itself.
I did. I felt good about selecting OHM.
Yeah, well, no, that's not the question.
I mean, the process that went through the people, and then I was also comfortable with the final outcome of selecting OHM from start to finish of the selection process.
And I would agree with that. I like the process we went through. I think we all agreed that it was a good process. You know, it's an exercise in due diligence is what it is. And that's the key to our fiduciary responsibility as a board member. And then the second part is we were comfortable picking OHM and the recommendation of the subcommittee that presented that. Okay. The question is why aren't we doing that again? If we like the process, they could win again.
I believe when we picked them, we had said or planned on doing 1 and 2 is how I remember it. Now I could be wrong because that was, you know, quite a while ago. But I thought we had said we were gonna go with 1 and 2, but 2 wasn't guaranteed. So going through the process again, when I personally wasn't nearly as disappointed in the outcome of their or performance of their duties as others, I didn't have an issue moving forward with them without going through another selection process because we had already done that for the whole project. And we had said, we might want to stick with 1 and 2 for them, as I remember it. But once again, that was a while ago.
and that was before I was here, so I'm not able to say for sure what happened. I will say if we do go through a selection process, we will be back here in February of next year to select a contractor.
That's perfectly fine with me because we're talking millions of dollars of taxpayer money. And we've been working on this up here since 1945. And a national year is going to make a hill of beans difference, I don't think, especially when you're talking millions and millions of dollars. You sometimes just got to roll up your sleeves and do the hard thing and unpopular thing. And maybe it's unpopular internally to do it, but I just think that in the end of the day, when somebody comes up to me in the supermarket and says, what the heck did you do with my money? I can tell them we did the right thing.
How much, I got a question for staff, and I don't care who answers, or if you tell me that you can't answer, that's fine also, but by going through the process again and selecting, and it could be the same firm, but selecting somebody else, how much advantage, being that OHM did phase one, are they going to have over somebody else to get them up to speed on phase two? Or is that not an issue at all? You know, so are we going to be paying somebody else to get up to speed to where we're at, being that they've already done the initial one? Or is all that initial information going to be able to be given to a different firm and not take forever to get up to speed? So there could be an economic question there also.
If I would think that it's going to be somewhat equal. I mean, simply because the report is written, we own the report.
Right, we own the report.
And we're now in a direction that we want to go, and they're going to be starting from scratch here to figure a crossing anyway. So anybody who is going to do it is going to be starting at the same point, I think.
Is that a correct statement or not, or?
I believe so. All the information from phase one is on our website, and that is our information, and it's there today for anyone to go and look at. Why we're here today talking about this next proposal was after the completion of phase one, it was discussed that we're not locked into any other phases
Right.
with OHM. It's clear that we can go and solicit anyone. And so board, you directed staff to proceed ahead knowing that we're not locked into anything.
Right.
So proceed ahead to obtain a proposal for phase two from OHM. So that's all we
I
have
remember
here.
that.
Yep.
That's what we agreed
Yeah,
to.
yeah.
And so we're not rushing the gate, but
100%.
we
Right.
looked at that to say, okay, and if what they present we don't like, then we can open it back up.
Because we didn't know the
and
numbers or
solicit.
anything else at that
That's
point.
exactly how it
You're
happened.
absolutely right. That's how I remember it too.
Yeah.
That's how I remember.
Yeah, because that was the same meeting where you extended their specialized engineering services. You said, yes, go ahead and continue using them for roundabout designs and that type of thing.
Right.
And then we said, okay, well, how do you want us to proceed with phase two? We can either start from scratch, or we can get something from OHM and go from there and see what the decision is from there. And that's what we've done so far. So we've done what you've asked us.
Right, yeah.
To put
And I don't think
together this.
anybody is questioning that. I think you guys are absolutely right on base for what,
Right.
for that. And Jason remembers it, and so do I, that was a fact, that we were gonna look at this number not knowing what that number was. So I guess, at this point, I mean, I guess they pretty well defined the scope of phase two in their proposal.
In their proposal, correct?
In their proposal. And I guess at this point, if we're gonna, I mean, I guess we have to think, are we comfortable with that scope of work, number one, regardless of who it is, for phase 2A A and 2B, I guess, or however we're doing. However we want to call it, whatever we want to call it, A and B, I guess. If the scope is there, I guess, do we, for what Mark wants, and I think Jason too, do we talk to somebody else about, what would their price be for something like this? Is that where we're headed, I guess? I guess that's my question.
I'm open to either direction, whether we go forward with OHM or otherwise. However, I just think it should be stated, I mean, if there are other options, and I mean, are we not?
It's a lot of money to hand
It's a lot
somebody
of money,
without
yes.
knowing if it's a good price or a bad price. And I understand the process. I can understand the process and then how this works. Doesn't mean I have to like it.
Right.
Right.
I understand.
And that's part of the thing is, and you 90% of what we do here, we are getting a hard number bid for a project that will be complete.
Right.
Here, you're not doing that. That is not how this process is intended to be set up.
Right.
You select your contractor based on who you feel is the best contractor to do the job, and then you negotiate a price with them based on that.
Right.
And that is the way this whole process is set up, and that's the specific reason why, even within Act 51, professional services are not considered a hard bid item.
Right.
It is something that you have to be sure that you are comfortable with the contractor and you feel that they are the ones that can do the best job.
For me, the big, one of the only problems that I had with OHM is I wasn't sure that they had kind of a sense of where the board was at and the whole process along the way. I mean, and again, this might just be because I'm not familiar with the Pell process. I'm not as comfortable with it. I tend to be a little more direct, government costs a lot of money and all that, just because it has to be redundant and whatnot. But at the same time, we are at a point where we are literally we're hiring somebody to find us a path across the river, because of whatever considerations that have to be there, whether it be, in ecological concerns, structural, the whole engineering paradigm, whether we go a little north, a little south, straight across. I mean, how does this, and I just want to know that whatever contractor we have working for us has our intent in mind in going forward and then navigating those waters, so to speak.
Well, let me clarify. The Pell has nothing to do with your intent. And that is the other part of the problem. The Pell is designed to be generated based on what is best for all of the entire process. And so you can hire somebody to design a bridge and put a bridge in. You're never going to get federal funds for it. The whole idea is you're supposed to have somebody there to evaluate how it's going to be built, where it's going to be built, whether it's going to be built.
Right, from need to everything that takes you to get that need accomplished.
Right.
And they could come up technically with no need and no crossing.
That is exactly it, and that was exactly
That's-
what I wanted to state.
In a
here as
nutshell,
well,
they could tell us no.
is the Pell process takes the 5 identified alternatives that the community has selected, has put out there. But there's always that no-build option as well, based on what their findings are, the ecology, the traffic patterns. It could be something that they say, do nothing.
Right.
Is the best alternative.
Right.
So it's that process that if we ever want to have state and federal funds involved, this is the process to follow. And this is how we go. That way the public has nothing to stand on and to say that this was driven by the road commission, this was driven by engineering consultants, OHM, or anyone else. It's the process that it goes through. And that's, it's hard to accept.
Right, because you're hiring somebody, and I'm getting a little more of the grasp of this too, because it's a different concept.
Yes, it's
It
very
is a
different.
different concept. You're hiring somebody, you think there's a need, and you're hiring somebody that has no agenda and is going to tell you in their data-driven, whatever data they can get, you know, because they're looking into the future, data-driven information on really what your needs are.
Right.
So they could come up with a whole different set of what our needs are than what we think it is. So we're really not hiring, we're hiring somebody, like you said, there was the 5 basic things that come out of that, and they're supposed to elaborate further on that. They're supposed to take a look at those 5 different things and then come up with how that all meshes together.
Yeah, so they'll be looking at at the 5 alternatives, they'll be going through the process, and when we get done with 2A, developing that, we'll have one alternative that is deemed the best. And then we move on to 2B, which is then identifying the costs for that alternative.
As well as any environmental impacts that we will have to deal with.
That whatever rolls out of
So essentially,
phase A.
so
Phase B is dictated.
phase 2A is essentially,
Right.
can we actually do this or not?
It's
Should we?
Should we?
Should
Is there a
we?
need?
yeah,
And if we should, where should it go?
Right.
To most effectively address the traffic that's out there.
the needs of the community.
So I'm that hard guy. You hire somebody, sign a contract, or build it, you know,
Yeah.
and this is not that process
Right.
at all. So you gotta get that right out of your head,
Right.
because that's not the you're signing a contract to have somebody tell you what they feel the needs are.
Phase 2B is that part of the process though.
Phase 2B starts talking about, once they've narrowed it down to the
Right.
one
Yeah.
solution,
Right.
then they start looking at the hardcore environmental impacts and the hardcore difficulties of construction. And they may then at that point say, okay, well, there's this portion of wetlands that's not possible to get around, so we're gonna shift it this way. And then you'll start finding, whether, is it a straight bridge, is it an S bridge, you know, and how does that work based on getting around all this? But right now, they are going to be looking at the 5 solutions that we had and narrowing it down to what is the best solution to appease and alleviate the traffic congestion over the next 25 years.
To meet the data, to meet the
Right.
to meet the metrics.
Right.
Meeting those traffic projections.
And if you don't follow these Pell
You don't get the money.
steps, you don't
So-
get federal money,
Right,
and
so-
without federal money, we can't
Well,
afford
there,
anything.
anything, right.
So I want to,
Back then
Carol?
to the process that, you know, we basically, with our 5 defined needs, basically we could use a different contractor without much impact on them getting up to speed if we so chose.
Correct, we have the
Because we have that right there. We've already paid for that.
Yep.
Right.
So, Mark, did you have something, or Andy?
yeah, I did. And, you know, I agree with everything that was said. Academically, in terms of how that process works for the Pell, I've been researching this to understand in other communities how it's been applied and why. So I'm not looking at it in a vacuum, just on our situation. But I might surprise you guys a little bit on this one, because actually I do think OHM has an agenda. I don't think they have an agenda specifically to us, but I think they have a design agenda. I think they've been influenced by the federal and state government in terms of how they want things to be pushed and pulled, be able to get the money. So there's that element. And I think that they've also, just as human beings, the human factor, have been through this process before in several communities, and it's influenced their way of thinking. They've had to alter their way of thinking. So they're not looking at it academically anymore. They're looking at it, it's going to drive them by the influences and experiences they've had. So I think they come to us with a preconceived agenda as a human being, not necessarily academically. And so I think there is one. But Carl, to your point, I don't think they came to us with an agenda about our project, but I do believe that OHM, like many firms, are culturally influenced, and therefore they have an agenda in their culture. And that's what we're dealing with. Because when we spoke to Matt, the first time that we were like, whoa, what are you communicating to the public? And we don't, shouldn't you talk to us first before you talk to the public and broadcast this to the media? And it was, oh yeah, we probably should have thought about that. 2 months later, they did it again. Okay, so they didn't listen to us. They heard us, but they didn't listen. Okay, the other thing is that, and I agree again with the process academically of the Pell as the way Brad described it, in terms of they're going to come up with solutions that we might not be comfortable with, or we don't even think you should proceed with what your grand design is here, okay? Well, when I look at some of the things that they proposed, and one of them that created a tremendous amount of controversy and a lot of discussion was 10 roundabouts on Sarasota Airport Road. It doesn't take an engineer to figure out that that was a stupid idea. And I can't even believe that they floated it out there to us, let alone the public. Because it's, well, number one, it didn't solve the big picture. And we are asking them for a big picture solution. We understand there's going to be components that are going to take place in between in the big picture to make it the big picture. But to come up with that, and I know that they floated one out there, but they didn't come and take formally with it, was a floating bridge over the river, over the Boardman River or the lake. I mean, those are just pie in the sky ideas, but they did throw out the 10 roundabouts on Sarasota Airport Road. And if you all remember how much feedback we got on that, was that the focus of our study? Absolutely not. Did it take up a lot of our bandwidth? Yes, it did. So that's why I question them. I wonder why an organization would float something out there like that when they know that isn't a solution, and it just created a controversial issue for us to deal with. And because this is such a critically sensitive subject in our community, I would think any engineering firm of any metal at all would refrain or restrain themselves from putting out things that are frivolous, like 10 roundabouts on South Airport Road, when we really need to be focusing on the bigger picture. So.
And I will, Mark, I will tell you right now, yes, I understand that people right now are saying that about roundabouts, but if you go downstate on far higher volume roads than we have, they have roundabouts about every quarter to a half a mile for 20 miles long in certain areas. And they do it all over the place. And that is one of the pushes that is coming from Federal Highway. They are finding on every study that roundabouts are one of the best ways to make a safe flowing corridor. And so they presented that as an option, and it could work, but it would mean for us, we'd have to condemn a lot of buildings, which we were not willing to do.
Yep. Brad, I appreciate you bringing it up because you just made my point. Yeah. You made my point perfectly. They came to us with an agenda because they know that's what the federal government wants, not what our community needs to get the Pell.
But
I
that's,
don't know if anybody's picking that up, but that's exactly what I'm talking about. They are influenced and they have an agenda,
right,
and it's different.
because they are traffic engineers and they are learning every year what is an improvement. And you may call it an agenda. I'm hesitant to call it an agenda, I guess. I feel it's something that as we learn more and more about how traffic flows best, they start taking into account these things, and the Federal Highway Administration does the research. So yes, you're going to see that no matter who presents this to us, they're going to have the same baseline knowledge, that is knowledge that has been gained through former projects and what is out there for research. The federal government has come out with numerous studies about how much better roundabouts are than traffic signals. When I went down with Wayne and Joe and Ron and Haley, we went down to look at Ann Arbor's scoot system. We went down and we looked at a roundabout. It's a 2-lane roundabout all the way through. On the north-south leg, it has about 35,000 cars a day, and on the east-west, it's probably got between 20 and 25,000 at least. You know, we don't have roads that have 35,000. That roundabout was amazing how well it cleared traffic. Now, take that as you will. I understand it's a thing that's going to take a long time for people to get comfortable with roundabouts, and it may be beyond the scope. The biggest problem I feel with it for us was the fact that, you know, some boards would be more than happy to go out and vote to condemn some buildings and put up roundabouts. But
I don't object to roundabouts, Brad. I want that clear. I mean, I drive through them. I like them. They're very effective. My concern, and it still is today, and I think it's valid, 10 roundabouts in that short stretch of road without any big picture solution on either end is not a solution. It could have just been another problem created. But because they didn't present it out there as an aspect of the big picture, you know, to receive them in one end and out the other and vice versa, it was boom, isolated. Here's 10 roundabouts on South Airport Road. And everybody looked at it and went, oh, that's a bad idea. Not everybody, the majority said that's a bad idea. Had they come back or had they come out the gate with, hey, we want to come to the board, explain why we want 10 roundabouts in here, and then why it's going to affect the big picture in the crossing and moving traffic through as a full comprehensive plan. That's how they should have communicated. So this goes back to them not communicating well to us too. So, I mean, again, I'm not against roundabouts. I'm against the design of so many without a full thought out process that they can extrapolate to us as a board and our engineering team and you, and then we can send it out to the community in a way that they can understand it. That to me is, and again, you know what? I don't think I want an engineer to do my communications for me, but I also don't want a writer to build a bridge either. So.
Brad, am I misunderstanding? Maybe I'm seeing it differently than Mark is. With this Pell process, they come up with a number of solutions, some of which we're going to say there's no way we're going to do that because we're not going to condemn properties. We don't think that's right. But they go to the public, they get all the public opinion, then they present it to us, and then we make the final decision. Not we make the final decision, we figure out how to push it to the community. I thought it was, they got community input, final report to us after that.
that is correct. Yes, that is the way the Pell process is supposed to be done. They present the final recommendations more than we're probably ever going to select. They present it to the community to get that community feedback. When we got that community feedback, we had 400 people still commenting on it. And then after they got those comments back, they were able to put together the final Pell process, the final Pell report, and then present it to the board. And at that point, it's up to the board to decide which phases of that Pell they are interested in implementing. So the final phase in a typical Pell process is then presenting it to the board to be voted on. So they can say, okay, yes, we accept this report, and that's all you're doing, is you're accepting the report, and then over the course of the next 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, a year, whatever it takes the board to come to an agreement, you then discuss what they've shown you in the Pell report and what are we going to do with this information? Which portions of it are we going to implement? Which portions are we going to say, no, we're not willing to do this because of X, Y, and Z? And then it's ours from that point on, because we've gone through the process. They have presented it to the public. They have gained the public input, put together the report, and then presented it to the board as a final product that the board has as their next decision-making point.
Thank you.
Is it my turn again? Well, I'm going to throw this out there, and I'm just kind of compiling everything that I'm hearing from everybody, and then I'll, whatever inputs. But what I'm hearing is we want a couple other sets of eyes to take a look at this next phase. Am I incorrect here, or am I correct here? I guess that's, rather than, I mean, we want to proceed. Do we want to proceed looking at?
Are you asking, do we want to put an RFQ to multiple companies to come in and re-interview?
That's basically where we're at here.
If that's the question, I'm going to say no.
I have a question before I can answer that.
Okay.
And it's probably going to be something that both or all Phil, Brad, and Wayne will have to answer. And that is looking at these numbers and what OHM is providing for a bid. With your experience in this home of projects, is this remotely close, or are they throwing a huge number at us thinking, we've got these guys, we're going to go ahead and soak them for all we can?
From my experience, I would say it's not exorbitant for what they're doing. The amount of work that they have to put in, and OHM is not the single largest financial portion of this. OHM is $458,000. WSP is actually the largest at $583,000, and GEI is coming in at $84,000. So of the three consultants that are going to be working on this, WSP is actually going to be the largest collector of money from the entire contract. OHM is just moving forward because they are the primary that we had originally. And so, we start looking at it. We assumed, and based on expectations, we expected that this and the next phase combined would be right around $2 million. And that is still roughly where we're looking to come out, because we're a little bit over $1 million, but this is by far the bigger portion, I think, of these two things. And I think, Wayne, you agree that this is a bigger portion of it than 2B, because to look at 5 solutions potentially and say, yes, this is the one, there is a lot of time and a lot of engineering hours and a lot of data analysis and a lot of walking each of these paths, because they're not going to be able to just, take data. They're going to have to go out and look at what's out there. So this is going to be a lot more involved a portion of phase 2 overall than 2B. So I think we're still in that $2 million or less range, hopefully. Obviously with the cost of everything kind of uncertain right now, who knows? I mean, I would assume, people are going to be, we're still going to be moving, in the right direction with everything. But I think, $2 million is still a fair estimate for phase 2.
I mean, we could,
I mean, that's what we originally talked about.
right. Bill and I are a little sidebar here, but,
We couldn't hear you guys. Andy, did you hear him? I couldn't hear him.
I could not hear them, no.
Okay, do we proceed with going back to OHM and saying, hey, these numbers aren't quite what we thought they were? They said it was a negotiation thing.
Want to try and have them try and trim some down and reduce the price somewhat?
Well, I don't know.
Or at least remove some of the surprises.
There's 4 spots per Jason that they could take it back.
Exactly. That's my concern.
Right.
And I don't, and you don't go, it's like going in with a pea shooter asking, it's going to be ineffective because we have no other option. We've created a position of no leverage whatsoever. We don't have anybody else in the wings. Haven't talked to anybody. That's the whole concept for me is it needs to be somewhat of a competitive bid process. I understand how they go through their studies and all this, but there is other organizations that can provide these services, and we haven't looked at them. And I'm not concerned about the delay. There's no delay. That's an artificial. If there's a delay, then somebody's put a timeline in here that we haven't talked about yet.
The dollar amount, we aren't really looking at a competitive bid here. The dollar amount is what the dollar amount is. You should be selecting the contractor that is going to be doing the best job for you, not who is the cheapest.
Well, Brad, we don't always take the cheapest. We don't always take the cheapest. We never have really just done that.
Right, and I understand, but this is, I hesitate to use the word bid or anything to that effect, because this is not like a typical bid where people are submitting a price. If we do this again, we're talking about getting qualifications again.
Right. It's a qualification, and then it's qualifying, and I think it's the same way that we did it, was qualify the contractor, and then we came up with a dollar.
Mm-hmm.
And
Well, I'm sitting here on the other side of the computer world, and I can't see the expressions and all that. Is Wayne and Phil both in agreement with what Brad said about the prices probably in the ballpark of where it should be? They're not taking us to the bank to take every extra penny that they could possibly, because we're suckers and they've got us on the hook.
No, I don't have any fear of that at all. I think they have researched this well, put together based on what they feel the amount of time and efforts that it's going to take in order to present this next phase, and these dollars are in there. I think if something were to go where all of a sudden things just fell into place and they didn't have extra work to be doing, or things of that nature, they're not going to be billing us for work that they have not done.
Bill, your turn.
No, I'd agree with Wayne, and the way I read it, they're billing actual hours, and right now they're giving us their best estimate of the amount of time involved for each phase.
Okay, so you three are comfortable, having been in this world for a couple of months or a couple of years, that it's in the right range of where it should be.
Throw something away.
You ready?
I am comfortable with it. I don't think it's an exorbitant amount. One thing I will again state, we went through these, and if you read through all of the comments from all of the people that were on the evaluation, they were pretty much uniform across the board that OHM was definitely the better of the three contractors. The next phase, if we were to do this, we're going to be finding, I don't even know, right now who would be somebody we'd get in here. Do we do it on a short qualification? Do we do a full-blown presentation again? That's my thing, I guess, would be, if I'll let you guys decide, but, give us some direction come Thursday of what we want, what you want us to do, so that we know how to pull this thing together.
Bill, you got something?
With the answers that you guys gave, I'm comfortable moving forward with OHM at this point, because that was the question that we were asked.
Hey, when we started this out, we sent out RFQs, request for qualifications. When we looked at them, price wasn't part of that initial process that we went through. It was qualifications of them, of their contractors, of their subcontractors, of everybody that on their team. And we made the basis, we picked OHM based on everybody's opinion of how they viewed their qualifications and how their qualifications were presented to us. And quite frankly, if those same people were sitting and came back and we went through that whole process again with those same people, I don't think I would change my mind one little bit. If we were to do it again, there's no guarantee it'd be less. There's no guarantee if somebody came in and said, oh, hell, OHM said it costs $1 million. We can do it for $900,000. And a year from now when they're done, there is absolutely no guarantee anywhere of the slightest that it wouldn't be $1 million or $1.1 million or $1.2 million. Period. I mean, there isn't. So to get into a roundabout discussion about price and cost is sort of necessary, but it's not whether or not $1 million, what is it, but is that a fair and reasonable market price for the level of service and the level of qualifications we're going to get. I mean, when we hired an attorney and companies that do all our work that we get, well, this attorney charges $125 an hour, this one only charges $110. So it doesn't mean we charge, because we got a better attorney for that extra $5. Yeah. So I guess, again, I go back, it's RFQ, request for qualifications. Who has the qualifications to do the best possible job? So now I guess we could write up a request for sort of qualifications and put a proviso in there that we want to hire somebody who will come to us, ask us what our preconceived notion is and what do we want out of this, and then bend the Pell process to justify what we're sending them to do. Well, in fact, if it probably won't work. We couldn't do, so we're going to go through a rather convoluted process to come up with, I think, probably the same thing that we have now. So I guess my concerns is that we look at OHM's proposal. If there's some big gaping holes there that we figure need to be negotiated a little tighter, cost controls and justifications and so forth, or a process where prices are going beyond the billable hours are getting longer, that they have to come in and make sure those are justified ahead of time. Not, fait accompli, as they say. And my French is too. Anyway, so is mine. Anyway, that there are things put in place so that we will in fact know ahead of time, and it will be justified and it will be discussed, and we will look at it if it's going over these projected cost figures. So I guess I don't see that going out for an RFQ again would that there's a strong possibility that there'd be a benefit to us, either through the level of qualifications that we could possibly come up with, or dollars that we may or may not be able to figuratively possibly maybe save or not save. The bottom line is it needs to be done as well as possible. To hire a second tier individual that's supposedly cheaper and wind up with a really screwed up report, and we don't get the federal money anyway, then we sort of really wasted our money. So I don't see moving away from OHM unilaterally at this point is beneficial to us. But we do need to look at the proposal, look at it like hard-nosed business people, and make sure that there are no big gaping loopholes. The costs are controlled, and if they're getting out of hand, that we have plenty upfront notice and we can deal with it. RFQ, qualifications.
One thing I will say in this too, as we can see, we're attending these meetings digitally now. There is no reason why OHM could not meet with our board computer-wise on a fairly regular basis, whether it be monthly, every other month, whatever, And then it's not, you're not talking about them then driving 4 hours here, spending the night and having to drive 4 hours back. So I mean, if you're wanting to have regular updates with the technology that we now have and we are experiencing, I think they would be more than willing to be able to say, give you a 15, 20-minute update of how things are going as often as changes were coming. I mean, they seem to be really anxious to say, look, we want to make sure this is done so that whatever is decided is done with the best interest of getting the final go out of the Fed and MDOT.
You could build the meeting thing into your negotiations and how often they report, as it's in here kind of already, but and Bill's making some good points.
Now, you said you found.
Well, there are multiple.
And
I think,
we need to address those before we proceed on, if that's what we're gonna do. Maybe we need to.
and it does say that it's up to the board to proceed, I mean, there are some things in it that are going to still be at our discretion, whether or not we want to spend some more money or approval. It'll be upon approval, but the fact remains that, they left the door open for advanced costs beyond whatever it is that we negotiate as far as an ideal. This is what, the fixed price is going to be. So.
Can I make a suggestion? Because there's some things I'd like to talk about, but because it's contract negotiations and money, that we may want to, at the meeting, go into a closed session and discuss negotiations of this contract and some of the things I think Jason's talking about. So is that right or wrong to want to do it that way?
I think we got two hurdles to get over. One is to decide if we can go out for RFQs, and if we are, then there's no need to have that conversation about that proposal in any great detail.
Right.
And once we put that behind us, then we can talk about the document itself, and then at that point, I think if there are delicate things, just like buying real estate or whatever, there are things we probably can do and should do behind closed doors because they are sensitive, and that would depend on,
We're not with it. We're not very close to going into closed session, I would think, to discuss a contract.
So who's in favor of going forward with OHM at this point, other than myself?
Well, that's a vote that we can't take right now, Andy, in a working session.
Can't we get an opinion on that versus not a motion, but isn't part of the working session getting a feeling of where we're at? Or am I misunderstanding that, Mark?
Well, I don't know. That's more of a legal issue, but it's, if we were to say, if we're going to have a consensus to go to the next meeting and make the decision about if we're going to do an RFQ or if we're just going to accept, that's what we can do tonight. I don't think we can say,
I've already told Brad that this issue will be on the agenda next week. It's going to be on the agenda next week, whatever way we decide to go. And
it might be a 5-minute discussion or an hour.
It could be, and it's just an agenda item, which could have action or not action. It was not, because I knew after this meeting, we were going to have to do something.
Yes.
Right.
So it's not any one firm, or if it's going to go back out or whatever, it's still going to be on. It will be on the agenda next week. And
I mean, my only reason for asking it, if the majority of the board is in agreement that at this point, our belief is we're going to move forward with an RFQ, I don't think we need to keep beating that horse on whether or not we want to do the RFQ.
Well, I think we can present the proposal of phase 2A for you, give you a real high level of where they're coming in at and what they're talking about. And then we can probably adjourn this and come back next week on Thursday for our regular board meeting. And then we vote and decide then at that point.
yeah, exactly.
I mean, I don't think we need to, you're right, I don't think we need to go a whole lot more into detail at this point, but I would like to have Wayne give you guys at least a high level of where we stand on phase 2 so that you're all aware of it and you can think it through between now and Thursday. Of
Okay.
questions you have of us or of the consultants, and what we're going to do to move forward. And so, that way, if you decide, at that point, we are gonna have it, we're gonna want to have the consultant join us online. We have them online and they can talk through and they can, deal with some of the issues. Next week, Thursday, when we actually are ready to make a decision. Does that work for everybody?
I'm comfortable with that, and I think what we've done here tonight in this, and I'm gonna let Wayne do his thing here on that next phase there, but I think we've all been reschooled on the whole process here, so that we're all aware, whether we like the process or not, the process is the process. And that's how we have to proceed, no matter who we're with, to be able to get the monies we're gonna need to do whatever we're gonna do.
Right.
So I think that just has brought that back. It's not our normal process where we're gonna build a road, we're gonna put a bid out there and they're gonna build us a road. This is not anywhere near that. So it's a whole different animal, and you gotta get your head around it. It's an unknown deal that you're dealing with. And so we gotta be comfortable with whoever that contractor is. We have to be comfortable with them, so.
I'd like to say that it won't matter who we choose.
Mark, we're not hearing you clearly.
Can you hear me now?
You're very broken up and garbled.
And reverbing.
Yeah, I don't have anything else on. Any better?
He's bad right now.
Yeah.
It sounds like you're talking in front of a fan. I mean, it's very garbled.
With wireless, like a hotspot.
Yeah. Well,
Try it again, Mark.
no. Oh, here's what we're gonna do, Mark. Wayne's gonna give he's gonna finish up on this. And I think that's probably where we're at for the evening, I believe. And then everybody can get their head around, and if something else comes up, Brad will certainly shoot us an email, or Kylie will, with any updates or whatever. But just plan on something on this being on the agenda next week, and that's gonna dictate how we proceed. That makes sense? So go ahead, Wayne.
Okay. Without diving down into the pucker brush, there's several different parts of this kind of going through with this focused health study. So in some of it's going to seem, duplicative from what we did with phase 1, but that's the process we go back through there. So we're going to be, re-meeting with our stakeholders and public engagement again. So we're going to be developing a public involvement plan and meeting to meet those needs of the significant project at the high level with those groups. Ideally, we're going to use a local facilitator. Okay, that's the proposal. They're going to then be providing that information to those stakeholders and for that public outreach support. Using that local facilitator, again, is to, they are going to be the ones that are going to kind of deal with advising and providing guidance to the groups. They're going to be the ones that are in those meetings, and in those meetings, technical questions come up that we, or our engineers, our OHM, our consultants are then there to provide that technical expertise and answers. but the local facilitator is the one kind of running those groups and working through with that process. So they focus on process, not with the outcomes. That's their role. That helps then keep everything, they're a neutral presenter, they're at arm's length reach from us, even though we're paying for them, and arm's reach length from the consultants. This next process then will also be taking us in through having that initial consultation with the Federal Highway Administration and our other state and local and federal resource agencies. That's your Eagle, your DNR, all of those different groups. They're going to be brought in as well and discussed. Those identify those real hotspots, those areas you don't walk there. Don't even think about that. They're going to be the groups that help steer us away from there, so we don't wind up, going off down into an area where all we're going to do is waste a bunch of time. So those meetings will be going on, and we'll have that kind of guidance from our state and our federal partners in this. Again, we're going to be defining a purpose and need. That has to be, carefully crafted and vetted with the community and our other agencies there, in order to be able to, really move on. And we start off by using, phase one, that purpose and need, and building on from that. But we need to have this put into play, along with these additional, what we're looking at, additional concepts of our system, so that everyone understands what we need. We're not looking at building one super highway else. We want resiliency in our infrastructure. We want that redundancy, so that when there are issues with one particular route, whether it be something structural or whether it just be Mother Nature, causing havoc at one area, or just simple auto accidents, that we've got resiliency in our infrastructure, in our routes, that traffic is able to go elsewhere. So that all gets kind of built in with our purpose and need, and that's all being looked at. So then the last and one of the bigger ones in through here as well, again, is dealing with our social, economic, and environmental. It's collecting in all that information and viewpoints of the public, and the public from special interest groups that we have to take in and massage and facilitate, and putting together and looking at what are all those impacts. All of this information is being done and taken on each of these alternatives as we go forward. And then we start to determine this one got really hot, this one doesn't have any, but this one doesn't work for us. This one really doesn't work at all. And so it's not, you're not finding the path of least resistance. You're ultimately finding the best path for the big picture. And so you still might have some hot spots to deal with, but that's okay. You might have some sensitive environmental areas, and that's okay. That comes out in the wash in the end. And that's all balanced with the pros and cons of those other routes. And so this takes us into that, to the point where we're getting all of this down. It's all boiled down in the end, run through all these groups that we come up with, then that one alternative that we then get serious about looking at and moving forward there. and start then in with phase 2B. I think talking about phase 2B right now might be a little early. What the facts are, and they do allow, is we're able to start to kind of work with them a little bit during 2A. So but it doesn't start the official process of the NEPA process, but we're able to be working with them a little bit so they have a better understanding of what's going on. They're not brought in exclusively during that phase, but we actually can kind of get ourselves to, where we start to get some things developed as a plan to move forward into phase 2B.
Good. Anything, Andy?
I'm good.
You're good. You want to try to get Mark? Oh, okay, we got that. Okay, all right. Well, I think everybody, I guess, just be thinking on the process here for next week. If you maybe go through the variables in this proposal here, maybe we can address that at the third. And we can decide how we're going to proceed at that point. So I think that some dialogue, we'll have more dialogue then too. But like I said, it will be on the agenda next week. And regardless of what we do, if we decide not to go with OHM, then we'll go through the other process, or if we decide to go with, maybe we can redefine what we're going to do with them.
I mean, isn't that kind of the decision though? I mean, whether or not we're going with OHM.
Right.
Because if we bring it back for,
That's first.
Right.
I mean, ultimately, if we are deciding to, as you put it, we're going to come up with the same, the same three groups with the qualifications interviews again. That is, if we go there, it's because for some reason we don't want to use OHM. That's ultimately what it means.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
For whatever reason.
Well, that's the reality.
I think it's expensive.
Or
something.
Okay. Okay. We're gonna move on to the second public comment, I guess. Did anybody else join us in the interim?
No, when the phone call left.
The phone call left.
Okay. Well,
Think you want me to read it again?
if we have the same people on, I don't think we necessarily
I'm
need.
thinking maybe
There's some new
someone's new.
people that.
Oh, is there? Okay. Okay, go ahead. Read it, Kylie.
Any person may make an advanced appointment with the board regarding road commission topics for a regular or special meeting in accordance with the Open Meetings Act. If an appointment is made, the topic will be an agenda item. The following applies to public comments. Please state his or her name and address. Topics must be relevant to the road commission. Individuals are allowed to speak once for up to 3 minutes on a single topic, which may be extended by the chair. A group addressing the board requires a designated spokesperson who may speak up to 10 minutes. The board will not act on any item from the public that is not on the agenda. For people using Zoom software, please raise your hand through the Zoom app. We will unmute callers if you wish to speak. Say yes.
So,
For people who it's little 3 dots, click that and it'll say whatever. Yeah.
Still no one, Joe?
Nobody.
No? Okay, moving to the next item, 8. Fred, any comments?
Nothing major, just want to let you know that the COVID response unit here has still been moving forward with our staff. The drinking fountains have been shut off as per the new directive, since we are becoming potentially a public the accessible building at some time in the near future. They have said that once you do, you need to have the drinking fountain shut off. So we've done that. Also, we have the roofing project going on out front here. We just received bids on a roof for the rest of the building, which we will be presenting on Thursday. And then also we have bids on a new lowboy. The lowboy we currently have has got some issues, so we'll talk about that. One big thing which we're kind of looking forward to is we have rented a sifting unit, and we can get our sand for about $1 a yard instead of $4 and change a yard. Sift it ourselves and spend a total of less than $2 a cubic yard for sand.
That's a savings.
So we've cut our costs for sand, hopefully, in the future. We're gonna try it, give it a shot here this year, but we think we have found a way to cut our sand costs in half, if not less, instead of paying for it through like another contractor. So always looking to try and find new and creative ways. Dan and Rick both came up with that one, so kudos to them for looking and thinking outside the box.
Perfect. Perfect. That it?
That's it.
That's it?
We'll talk more on Thursday of next week.
Wayne, did you have any comments?
No, we're just to let you know, we are moving right along in our designs on the roundabouts. As Brad kind of mentioned earlier, the technology, we might not have rushed into it nowhere near as fast or lovingly embraced it like we are currently. Had we not had COVID come along, but it is actually working out very well. We have quite a few meetings with our OHM consultants on the engineering for the roundabouts. That's been working out very good. They're very accessible. We also utilize another form of Teams through our Microsoft, and that works out. That's working out very well too. So we've got multiple different avenues, and I'm very well impressed at how well everyone's been kind of working through all this, and we're not letting anything drop between the cracks.
Very good. Bill, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, the only thing I got, MTF report was released today for April, and it was down 11.6% from prior year. So that was basically the month of April. I think March was down a little over 9%. But as people start driving, it'll probably bounce back a little bit.
Well, I've noticed a big influx of
Cross
traffic.
our fingers.
Yeah, I've noticed it on the roads coming out of here.
Yeah, traffic is picking. Traffic.
So hopefully the rest of the state does as well.
Okay, commissioners' comments. Andy, anything?
Let's have Mark try to go first. If not, he wrote a comment I'd like to read for him so you can hear it.
Oh, Mark?
Can you guys hear me?
Oh,
we can!
We can hear you now.
Yeah, well, I got off my computer and got on my phone, so here we go. So thanks, Andy, for that, too. I really appreciate that. Hey, so I'm sure you've all heard what's going on in the middle of the state. That is actually where I grew up. And it's nothing worse than the worst disaster that's ever happened to that region. And with that, I would like to ask the board if we could, I don't want to say direct, but ask Brad if he would call, if he hasn't already, the Midland County Road Commission manager and offer our support in terms of equipment and personnel. They are in, and they can't do anything immediately because it is still, in most places, are under 9 feet of water. But when it's done, they're going to have so many culvert washouts and debris things to take care of. They literally are not going to have the people to do it. And you got 40,000 people, and there are people down there that are stranded in their homes. So I'd like to see if we could, You know, we did the same thing when Houghton got flooded out in their mudslides up there a couple springs ago. But this one is even bigger with 2 dam failures and actually more than that. So would that be something we would allow Brad to make that call and make that offer? And then if they do accept our offer, can we figure out some way we can coordinate to get our equipment and staff down there to help out in the short term to get them back on some roads and safety?
Brad, I have no problem with Brad calling and see what their needs are and if you know, if we can help out. I don't see that's absolutely the right thing to do. I mean, that's, you know.
Yeah.
Well,
They may not.
They may not want any, but who knows? If you,
And we
Yeah.
also then bring up the fact that Gladwin County Road Commission has a very big need also.
call them both.
So we'll call them both.
Call them both.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing, but I saw Mark had typed that. I knew he was from that area, and I think his plea or request or encouragement to the manager, however you want to phrase it, so we're proper, was probably better than me. But I was going to call Brad, but I realized we had a meeting today, so I was going to bring up as commissioner comments that maybe we should consider doing that. So thank you, Mark, for bringing that up for us.
Yeah, do them both, Brad. Anything else, Mark? No? Okay, good. Andy, anything else? Are you all set?
That was all I had myself. Thank you.
All right, Bill,
I'm good.
you're good.
Well, I have nothing more to say.
Jason?
Actually, it was nice to have to take a little zigzag route here to avoid the work we're doing on the roads out there to make them nicer. But I do have one thing I'd like to say as far as we've gotten a lot of correspondence from the Peninsula folks who it kind of bothers me. I mean, I don't go out there every time they have a meeting, and I tend to, you know, go to a township meeting when there's something we can offer of information that'll help them out. One of the things that I felt back early last year that was important to share with them was the fact that we were considering the possibility of taking over M37 Center Road. And some of the comments that we seem to be getting in some of the correspondence, you know, form letter stuff, it's like somebody prepared it and said, hey, you know, all you activists, let's get busy and make sure. Well, one thing that's absolutely wrong is that the board, they're stating that the township was never notified, never made aware of the possibility or the intent of this board to pick up M37 from the Michigan Department of Transportation. I mentioned it at least twice before we made the decision, and I just want to make that clear. And other than that, you know, obviously at this point, because of the lack of the ability to have an open meeting, Michigan Department of Transportation has put the decision off for some time. But that's okay. We're gonna be fine whichever way we come out of this. But I think I just wanted to get that information out there.
Yeah. I appreciate that. I think I'm good. I think it's encouraging here. We're seeing more activity and of course other businesses are going to be able to open up here. I think, as time goes on, we'll get back to somewhat normal. It's never going to be totally back to somewhat normal, but I think with this better weather, I'm seeing a huge increase in traffic in that. So hopefully everybody's safe and we'll get through it.
Move to adjourn.
We got to do a roll call on that. Or a second?
Sure, second.
Second. We have a motion and a second. If we are doing this over the internet, we have to roll call it. So.
Merrick,
Yes.
McKellar,
Yes.
Mauser,
Yes.
Gilman.
Yep.
And Brown.
Yes. We are adjourned. Thank you. Thank you all.